You know, at Gallup, we've asked a question in, I think, about 6 or 8 different countries. And the question is, if your child shows up at home with the following grades, an A, a C, and an F, which grade deserves the most attention? And I bet those of you who are parents in the room can guess what we found. In every country we've studied, we find that the vast majority of parents say the F deserves the most attention. In the United Kingdom, we see that 52% of people say the F deserves the most attention, and 22% say the A, and then the rest say the C. In the United States, 77% of parents say the F deserves the most attention, and only 7 say the A deserves the most attention. Now, by no means would I advocate ignoring that F. If a student's failing a class, that's a serious problem, and it needs attention, and it needs to be remediated, and students need to figure out ways to work around that. But why not start with a more positive focus on the A, maybe spend more time there, and then move on to strategies for remediating the F or working on the C? My hunch is, if you take, let's say, the student that shows up at home with the A and the F, and you look at where they have a lot of potential for greatness or success 20 years later in their life, it's probably in the area where they're getting an A in grade school and not the area where they're getting an F. There was a study conducted in the 1960s, and there were, I think, 6,000 10th grade students who participated. And the researchers were trying to figure out if you offer students different types of education, so there were different techniques around how to increase their levels of speed reading, how much would students improve? And the researchers, they didn't find many differences between the different techniques that they were teaching in the courses around speed reading. But something else came out of that research that was fascinating and really caught our attention. They found that the group of readers who were average to start, they started at 90 words per minute. The group of readers who were above average, they started at 350 words per minute. So there's a pretty big difference right there before any education has taken place. But then when they followed up after the students had been through the course, the average readers went from 90 to 150 words per minute, whereas the above average readers went from 350 words per minute to a whopping 2,900 words per minute. So this is just one illustration of what can happen when you focus a lot of energy in a person's natural abilities. And it connects to hard business outcomes. We conducted a study with timeshare salespeople from Marriott Vacation Club, and we simply had the timeshare salespeople go through a little assessment we call StrengthsFinder. It's about a 40-minute test on the web, and it helps individuals to discover their greatest talents. So the employee completed this assessment and then had a conversation with their manager about their strengths. 1 year later, if you look at the group that we conducted this with, we had a control group and a study group. The group that received feedback around their strengths, their closing percentage increased by 17%. So when I'm talking about closing a timeshare deal, that's like closing houses. So an improvement of 17% from baseline is a difference of millions of dollars at every single location Marriott Vacation Club has. Anytime you reach a fork in the road and you're trying to figure out, where do I invest my time, my effort, my development dollars, even if you're thinking about investing in an entire business unit, the right answer is almost always to invest in your areas of greatest strength, because that's where you will have the return.
My next guest says that most of us are wasting our time trying to fix our failings rather than work on our strengths. Tom Rath is the author of StrengthsFinder 2.0, and he joins us now from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Tori. It's good to be with you.
Good. Okay, so the first thing you say in your book sounds kind of pessimistic, but it's actually a good thing. And that is, even though we're all taught that we can be anything we want to be if we just try hard enough, it's just not true. Why should we reject that line of thinking?
Well, the paradox there is that we spend all this time in life trying to be well-rounded and work on all the little things, and if the more time that we spend trying to be a little bit better at everything, the less chance we have of being great at something in life in general.
Got it. Makes perfect sense, right? Instead of going from fair or mediocre to good, let's go from good to great or good to excellent. And you have some tips.
You can actually get there faster when you're working in your areas of strength. That's the other thing that we've learned.
All right, good. And I know that you've got some tips to help us to figure out those strengths. And the first is quit trying to be well-rounded. So when you spend too much time doing that, I guess it's what you're telling me, that you focus too much on lots of small things instead of maybe putting more eggs in one basket where you have a chance to really, truly excel.
Right, that's the challenge where people try and be a little bit better at being a manager and at selling and teaching, whatever the job might require, but we found that people actually have specific talents and have a better likelihood of being successful if they focus in those areas.
How do I know what my best strength is? How do I know what should be the one that I really choose to go for is?
Well, you know, people can look at some natural cues. So what are the things that you've enjoyed doing over time? What are the natural things that when you're doing them, they almost seem effortless and you lose track of time when you're doing it? And then Gallup has an assessment we call Strengths Finder that is another way to diagnostically look at what are your very specific talents that are likely to endure over time.
I know one of the points you also make is to differentiate your natural talents from your hobbies and interests. What's the difference? How can I tell the difference? Why should I try to differentiate?
Well, a hobby is something that you enjoy doing, but you might or might not be that good at it, and is more than likely something you do in your recreational time. A real talent, like the natural ability to be competitive in an athletic event or in the application in a sales role, or if you look at a teacher or a nurse who has a natural ability to empathize with a student or a customer, those are the kind of things that we're more likely born with and that continue to endure and be stable over time.
And those are the things that I should focus on.
Right. We found that when people do focus in those areas, they just have more potential for success in a variety of job roles. So the key is to identify what are your talents, kind of point A, and connect that to the second point, which are the expectations of your job or what you're trying to get done.
I know you also say that it's important to be aware of how to manage around your weaknesses. Why is this important, and how specifically can I do that?
Well, we found that it's important to think about your strengths, but if you're not at least aware of your weaknesses, they can come back and get you in terms of if you're really pushy and just always moving through things, or if you don't pay attention to detail, for example. It's good to know that you might not have as much natural talent as someone else to do those things, so that you can either find a partner or a complementary partner who can help you to do those things in your role, or at least you're aware so that you can figure out systems or ways to manage around those over time. So in a real general sense, what we found is that people often spend 80% of their time on their weaknesses and only 20% of their time building on their strengths. And what works best is when you flip that around and spend maybe 3/4 or 80% of your time building on your successes and what you're naturally good at, and then maybe the other 20 or 25% of your time thinking about how to manage around those weaknesses.
All right, and in addition to your own strengths, you also say get to know the strengths of your coworkers. Why does that matter with what I want to do for me?
Well, it matters because if you look at the way our strengths are expressed and what we do on a day-to-day basis, we need to know what the people around us do well so that we can do things in partnership and in a workplace, so that we can think about what are the strengths of everyone sitting around the table on a given work team, so that you have each person not only enjoying what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, but they're more likely to be productive and get things done if they're working in areas of strength. So simply having that conversation with your friends or your family members or your colleagues helps people to use their strengths more on a daily basis.
All right, so we're going to be dismissive of the weaknesses in terms of where we spend our time building and growing, and we're going to focus more on those strengths. Tom Rath, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Tori.
Sure, and again, the book is Strengths Finder 2.0.
ABC News Now, good to know.